Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I am here with none other than ZenJen from ZenJen CoNexions. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It is about grief, so unfortunately, we're going to talk about some grief today. But she's got some amazing things, some amazing ideas and ways that she helps people with grief and helps herself through grief. So, hi, Jen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Faith. It's been quite a while since I talked about my grief journey, and I really appreciate you inviting me to do so.
Absolutely. I feel that my personal opinions only, these do not reflect those of others, and blah, 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 whatever mantra we have to say here. But I feel like grief isn't talked about enough. People gloss over it. People just go straight to business because I'm very business minded and I come from the business world and the online world. And people are like, well, it's grief. Go ahead, do your shit, get your stuff done, mosey on through it, and then tell me what you did on the other side. But it's like, sometimes that journey can take years or decades even to get through it if you get stuck in an area. What do you think?
I love that. Everything that you just said resonates so clearly for me. I mean, I hit the virtual scene pretty late in the game. I didn't get a smartphone until about 10 years after everyone else had already been plugged in for quite some time. Same for you? Yeah. And so it happened for me as a result of my younger brother's passing.
Okay.
I was out my husband and I, we've been out here in the Texas Hill Country for about 20 years. And we used to just live very simply, walking to the farmer's market every weekend, going and jumping in the river when we needed some exercise. It was a very au naturel kind of lifestyle. And we didn't really feel like we needed to be like plugged in like everybody else. But something very interesting happened when my younger brother took his own life in 2015. We weren't raised in a religious household. We didn't have a family church. We weren't integrated into a community that has, I guess you could say, some protocols and standards for how to navigate through this. I was very much, I tell my clients and those who are in my orbit that my family, we worshiped at the altar of education and science. Yeah, it was a different experience. But when we were thrust into this experience of face to face with death of someone, who was a very integral piece of our family, my younger brother, he was 20 years old. And he was there one day and then he was gone the next. And there wasn't much science or any of our education that could explain away what had just like smacked us in the fucking face. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just out of nowhere. And it was something that I had to reconcile within myself. And I had to do so in a way that stayed integrated with my family so that we would come together rather than fall apart. And I also had to go on this journey of discovering, who is it that I am? Like, who is it that we are? And what is it that we're doing here? And I had to learn this in a way that was like, I had to plug in. I had to figure out, I knew I wasn't the only one going through this. And I knew there was a whole wide world of other humans out there that had information that I needed. I had this intuitive sense that now was the time. And it was time to not be isolated in a geographical, standard of beingness any longer. And so that was the beginning of my journey of grief and learning how to navigate through it. But it led me, I can say that this has been one of the most amazing gifts that I could have ever received. And many of the people who I work with feel the same way. I mean, maybe not when they're in the thick of it, right?
Right. Yep.
It doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like a gift. And I remember whenever someone told me, a medium who I'd hired to get it more in contact with my brother. And I learned eventually I didn't need mediumship from others in order to do that.
Right.
But at the time, it was very much a message that I needed to hear, was that this is the greatest gift that you will ever receive as a human on earth.
That
And
piece right there, sorry, I'm just that right there. I've always thought that because I lost my 19-year-old stepdaughter in 16. And she was a vital, like, I'd always wanted to be the stepmother that was not like the typical stepmother. I didn't want to be the evil stepmother. I wanted to integrate our families together and blend our families as one unit. It's like there was no bounds. There was no step in front of it when you talk about them. That's my sister, that's my brother. It didn't matter, like, who the biological parents were. That didn't matter in my world. I just wanted them to be blended. And so losing her, we lost her. It was a traffic accident, a vehicle accident. And so, like you, one day there, one day gone. Although I gotta say, suicide carries so much more connotation with it. I do not want to minimize that at all, because that is a whole other ball game. And every grief situation is different, and how everyone processes it is just as equally different. It doesn't matter, like, if there's two suicides or two traffic incidents, whatever, they're all different. Everything is different. And so I've often thought of, like, with her passing was a blessing in disguise. And I had to look at it as such. And I don't talk about that much because people look at you like you're crazy.
Oh my,
how can you think that them passing or them not being here is a blessing? I'm like, because I don't know what their journey was. I don't know what they were supposed to do. But all I know is what I am left with and the gifts and the tools that I can carry forward. That is what my job is. And so, like, after that, it made it easier for me to go into the grief world, because I'm like, I'm carrying too much baggage. I need to release some of this. And that was one of those things. It's like, it sucks that she's gone, but I have so many benefits that came after the fact. And so you can be hurt and okay at the same time. Anyway, I just want to stop you there, because that one was like, I've never heard anyone really talk about it like that, except, like, I feel it, I think it, I say it, and then people look at me like I've just grown, 4 tentacles out of my head. So anyway,
you're right. You're absolutely right. A lot of people aren't talking about that part. And I think that those, I'm going to call them caverns of exploration, that we are very timid to enter into. Those are the spaces where transformations are made.
Yes, they are, because when you dive into that, when you talk about it and you think of it as a blessing, you find all the blessings that they left behind for you. All the future connections and communications, all the things that are bringing you towards, because you would have never sought them otherwise. They wouldn't be there. Like, it'd be a completely different life that you lived. Different connections, different experiences, different everything. And so
I wanted to touch on another piece that you highlighted there for just a moment. You said, I don't want to minimize it. And I think that's such an important aspect about death, that people who have undergone great suffering as a result of loss there is this tendency, I mean, we're in a world of duality, are we not? There is this tendency to compare and cross
Yeah.
contrast what your experience is versus what my experience is, and who has had it harder, and what is
Right.
it that is, the more difficult cross to bear. And I can say that from my own experience, Faith, in I was my grandparents' caregiver during their last year of life under hospice care
Right.
for, I mean, this was years before my brother passed away.
Okay.
And I can say that there are such nuances of sameness in all of the passings that I
Yeah.
have endured and grown as a result of.
Mm.
That there is a connectivity quality to each and every experience, and that duality, that I think that it's something that's really only strived for here in the 3D as human avatars, as I like to call
Right.
them. Because
Yeah.
once we transcend to the other place, to the other consciousness, to the other realm, however it is that you define it, those things fall away. They don't matter any
Right.
longer. And it's funny whenever you are kind of coming to that place of piercing the veil and connecting to that other place, because you so very much want to connect with your
Yes.
loved one who has passed. You start to realize these duality features of human life, they start to kind of blend. Has that been your experience, where it's like these blacks and whites turn into a shade of gray of a greater understanding for, the bigger picture at play?
Uh, I don't, not for me.
Tell me.
For me, when I have this thing that when I see people, I see them in shades of color. I don't actually see faces very well. I see colors, not like bright red or bright blue, but like auras. And and for me, I love to see the colors. I love that when I think of someone, a color pops into my head. When I talk to someone new and they start talking to me and I start communicating with them, I see a color pop into my head. So I don't see things as, and maybe I just choose not to. Maybe I choose not to see things in black and white because everything has melded together. There is no beginning, there is no end. So there's not one starting point and one stopping point. It just kind of flows.
I love
And
that.
it's beautiful ambiance that we call life. And
It's
but
like a watercolor painting.
yes,
That's so beautiful. I feel that. Perhaps it's the metaphor I used of black and white and duality fading to gray. Like I really enjoy
and I could
you
see that in a
illuminating that with
I could
color.
see that in a watercolor, the black and the white and the fading to gray as well. But then I just see these little pops of color everywhere. It's like when I think of my loved ones, when I think of my family, when I think of the world, I think of like this gray canvas. But then when I think of people, I see a spark of color, boom, like a little dot popping up here, wherever. And that's how I see things.
And we're co-creating a masterpiece together.
Absolutely, always. We
That
are
is
creating everything together.
divine. So can I ask you also, whenever you think of your transitioned loved ones, this same experience occurs of the flashes of color?
I've only started recognizing that I had flashes of color probably in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years. I never really understood it until I started going through the grief process.
Mm.
And so when I think of my loved ones, theirs are more white. They're like shining, not necessarily pops of color anymore, but they're like that, that just shine. There's no, they're like the
They're not
combination.
on the canvas any longer.
They're
Is
like the
that
light shining on it. Yeah.
it's like the light source
Mhm.
that's kind of illuminating the canvas
Yes.
in a way.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I like that. I really do. That's I
Yeah.
love that.
And I don't talk about that much either. So I just, people think, what? Do you see people in colors? I'm like, maybe.
Well, it's
Why? Are you gonna
funny
counter
because
attack me on this?
yeah, I mean, people, do you ever find in the people that have trouble in talking about their grief, whenever, I mean, I'm not sure how you bring this up in conversation, if you do at all, but whenever I explain to the people I've worked with that you can still connect with your loved ones and you can do it as often as you want to. And you can connect with their frequency of beingness, and you can even do so in a way that's like unhindered by all that drama rama that's here on earth, that it becomes like a more, I mean, there have been loved ones that have passed, like my own stepmother. I don't talk about this ever, but because my father, he's still very much with us here in the 3D
Yeah.
world, but when her passing was a tumultuous one for me, because we had had a strained human life together,
Mhm.
and but she raised me, and for all intents and purposes, from the time I was 7. And as you know, from blending families, that doesn't always come with great ease and
No.
without friction, right? And I guess this is what I mean by, when I was in the thick of all of that, there was a whole lot of frustration and pain and agony, even while you're in the thick of
Mhm.
experiencing that. But whenever on the other side of, whenever she had transitioned from this world, and I had this newfound, I'm going to call it a relationship with her,
Yeah.
it was a new
Absolutely.
relationship. I mean, and it was, in many ways, it was more enriching and fulfilling in reconciling our relationship from when she was a human.
I love that, because that's a very good point. For the simple fact is that I think that when they transition over, all of their angst and their drama and their chaos and stuff has faded away, and all they have is nothing but love, and they're guiding you towards that. And so the lessons that they teach from the other side are very vast, very numerous. And so, yeah, yes, I believe there's a whole new relationship that you have with that person. And it's like, it's beautiful. Like, the only person that is hindering that relationship is you, because of
Mm.
the drama and the trauma that you're bringing to it, and that you haven't come to terms with.
The
You haven't
judgment.
released, you haven't
Yes.
like forgiven, you haven't accepted, you haven't, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like, that's on you at that point to make that relationship go further, because they're there, they're willing, and they have nothing but love for you.
I would venture as far to say is that is our purpose here on earth, is to transmute that in a way that is not only meaningful for you, but it's meaningful for the collective in a very beneficial way. That whenever you are not holding on to that judgment and that trauma and that duality of, well, this person was mean to me when they were alive, so I'm not going to, that's you holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore, first of all. And
Mhm.
second of all, it only existed when it did so that you could grow.
I agree. And I want to take it a step further. So, if you're talking about us, that's our whole existence in this world, is to transmute all that stuff. When you hold on to it, it tethers you to earth. When you let go, it releases you to rise above. And
Damn
so
right it does.
the more that you release, the more you can rise, and the more you can feel, and the more that you can connect. The more you hold on, the more you are chained to the earth and to all of the things that are holding you down and suffocating you.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. actually.
I just, I'm like, well, all I see are, well, my life revolves around plants and gardening. And so everything is in plants and roots and ascending and all of those things, because to me, that represents life.
Oh, I
You need,
love
you
that.
need a couple things in life. I mean, for plants and stuff, right? You need soil, water, and sunlight. And so
Ooh.
in the world like that we live in, you need soil, water, and sunlight. And those translate to soil is like, things around you. Sunlight is where your spirituality and stuff is coming in. And what was the other one? Water. Like, how are you feeding yourself? What are you taking in? Like, to
Your
me,
elixir
these
of
are the
life.
things.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm.
To me, it just makes sense. And I can relate anything in business, anything in grief, anything in whatever, back to gardening and soil and all those things.
Oh, I love that. I love that about you, Faith. I can't wait to learn more about all of that, with how you relate it into business specifically, because I would never have had an online business had I not gone through these transitional moments in my life where I'm, forced to make sense of something bigger than just me. But it's also about going into the inner confines of me and discovering who me even is.
Right.
And that has been, I mean, I like to call it an initiation pathway for
Yes.
owning your own business and extracting and alchemizing the magic that you have to bring into this world in a meaningful way for others, while it's constantly that balancing act of going inward and discovering more about yourself, so that you can exhume it and it can bear fruit, to
Right.
extend with your metaphor of plants. I love it.
Yes, I love it. And yeah, for me, I was in the business realm first. And so I started my online business back in 2014. And I started with copywriting. And then I transitioned into
Oh,
building
me too.
websites.
Me
And then
too, copywriting. So
right.
interesting. Sync.
And no, go ahead.
No, you go on. That's just cool that we have the same origin point there.
Yes. And so I wanted a job that I could work from home and be with my children and my family and stuff because I didn't want to run the rat race. And I just jumped into a different rat race with the
Mm.
online world. But for me, when I lost Cassandra, or when we lost Cassandra, I lost myself. And so I had to find who I was, and I didn't find myself for another, what was it? Another 5 years
Hmm.
after I lost her. I lost her in 16. And then in 2021, I lost my 4-year-old granddaughter in
Oh
a car
my.
wreck. So here one day, gone the next, or here 1 second, gone the next. And so at that moment, I'm like, okay, I don't care who I am. I need to start diving into this and start working through this grief, because I had these thoughts and these visions. And I'd always wanted to, when Cassandra had passed, like I wanted to help people. I have this way of compartmentalizing things and thinking for a different way. And I'm a problem solver. So thinking through this and internalizing this grief that I have, but putting out something else that's love, because money doesn't motivate me anymore. Money absolutely does not motivate me anymore. I'm like, okay, that's a materialistic thing. I need the spiritualistic things. I can't rely upon. Yes, I love the creature comforts. I love the AC. I love getting my lashes done. I love those things. But at the end of the day, if someone were to say, Faith, do you want to make $1 million or do you want to help, 10 people? I would absolutely go for the 10 people. But the
Mm.
$1 million does not equate to me as much as helping those people get unstuck from where they're at and whatever they're going through.
Mm.
So
Where do you think that comes from, though? I mean,
I think
you
for me,
laid
it
it
was
out
losing, it was
perfectly. Like everyone
losing.
knows why the money is motivating, but where does
Right.
the helping other people, where that drive, it's for me, it's a rush. I don't know if it's a rush for you, but
Man, it is. I liken it to, so if you knew me before 2014, or before I even met my husband in 2005, I would change jobs. I would get bored. I would change jobs. I was never the type to sit in a 9 to 5. I mean, I
Yeah.
had 9 to 5s. I think I worked in a factory for a whole hour and a half. And that was the extent of my factory work in my entire life. And I was snipping uh, threads from pillows. And I'm like, I can't do this. This is not me. This literally felt like my soul was being sucked right out through the scissors. I couldn't do it. And so ever since then, I'd work a job, like I waitressed, and I did all these non 9 to 5 jobs. And I was searching, and every time, and this may or may not play a part in it, I don't know, but it's very poignant for me. And growing up, it was, I had this thing inside me, and it would kept telling me, it's time to go. It's time to move. Let's go. Let's move. And so I would pack up literally in the middle of the night, and me and my children, we would move to another state. No job, no nothing. I would just literally pack up and move. It's time to go. I always had this thing. It was searching. I was searching for something. Well, when I found my husband, it kind of dwindled a lot when I met him. And then when I went into the online space, it dwindled like almost completely. And now it's like I don't even have those pangs anymore. Like, you need to go, you need to move, except for like creating something new, like a new opt-in or some way to help someone. So I think I've like transitioned my way into here. But going back, I was constantly moving as a child with my parents, and then now as an adult. So going through that, it helped me land on like the things that I didn't want then, like the 9 to 5 stuff. Like I knew that I was built differently, and I knew that I had all of these different qualities to take me forward into a whole new sector and a whole new realm with my problem solving, because I had to rely upon myself. It was me. It wasn't anyone else. I didn't have cell phones. I didn't have computers. I mean, I'm old school. I'm older than what apparently my daughter tells me I look. And so I grew up in the 90s, and
Me too.
we didn't have any of that stuff.
No.
And so you had to learn, like, we didn't even like have a house phone. Like most of the time, if we did, there was a party line. So you didn't call anyone because everyone was listening.
Oh my goodness. I love that. The party line. I forgot all about the party line.
Oh, the party line.
So cool. Love it.
So I problem solve. And that's where I get to the point of, okay, if I can help someone solve a problem, great. But then it led me to my husband with all these job hopping skills. He's in the military. He's like, babe, join the military. I need you to join the FRG, or I want you to join the family readiness group with the military. So that way, and I don't know if you're familiar with the family readiness group, but they're the transition between the soldiers and the family. And so we put on these events and we do all these things. I went in as just to be a volunteer, a monthly volunteer. Next thing you know, within 3 months, I am now the leader of the group, and I kept that role for 10 years. My husband had transitioned out of the unit, and they still wanted me to be the family readiness leader while he was not there. So, and I joke and say the longest job I've ever had was a volunteer.
Yeah.
So I'm like passionate about that stuff because I like helping people. And that was a way for me to plug in and be a part of something that was much larger than me on a much bigger scale than anything I could have ever imagined. I think that was my first foray into everything.
And that's kind of what the virtual space does in a way, is it emulates, for me, like I'm late to this party, like I said, but it emulates.
You're never late. You are right on time.
Oh, fashionably late. I make a grand entrance. I'll tell you that much. But it's funny because like the virtual space, you said something that was very, very poignant for me. The virtual space, it's like, it almost simulates the great beyond, right? The expansive infinite,
right,
of everything that's possible, everything that, all of the potential, like teeming potential that is there. And yet it's like, you don't have to move at all. You're like, it's this interdimensional experience where you don't have to leave your computer screen or your phone screen in order to access that infinite potential. And I don't, it's funny. I had like a lot of very similar experiences that you describe, job hopping, and I would rise the ranks very quickly, and it would then create this strangeness where it's like, I know I'm not meant to be doing this, and I really don't know why I got promoted to be like the supervisor of all these other people who seem perfectly content to be doing this, or if they're not going to try anything different. And I
Right.
never rise above middle management because I kind of freak the other people out up there.
Right.
And I throw these ideas out there. And so it's like you say you have to leave in the night with your children. I would have these panic attacks, and I'd have a nervous breakdown, and I'd literally just like collapse in the corporate bathroom. And that this was something that kept happening to me in this patternized fashion. And the last time that it happened, I mean, I'm not sure what your spiritual philosophy is, Faith, but I have come to learn that in my experience, synchronicities, things that happen in this divine timing at the right time and the right place with uniquely me, all converging at once, it's like that can't be an accident.
There are no coincidences. None.
Right. There's not. And the last nervous breakdown that I had leaving the last corporate job that was literally, like you said, sucking the soul out of me every single day I had to roll out of bed to go there. I got my daughter out of daycare. She was having panic attacks there every day too. The staff there, they couldn't deal with her. Like, it was too much for them, and she was being neglected as a result. And so I took her home. We went on a one income household regiment for the next, several years, because just a month or two later was when my brother passed. And it took me 5 years, like you said, to really integrate all that had happened and was happening. And I felt like this was my cocoon time. Yes. To be retreating from the world. But then there was this strange thing that happened after 5 years of being in this cocoon. There is this strong urge to exit. Yes. And to reemerge something different than what you were before.
It's pushing you. You feel this push. It's like, go. Now is your time. Now is your time to get out there. Now you know everything that you need to know at this moment. You have to go do this. But I believe, going back to what you were saying on the like pulling your daughter out and going into the one household, the one income household, in my mind, I interpreted it as it was preparing you for what was to come. Because how would you have been able to handle it if you were already melting down at work and your daughter was already having issues at the daycare? Like,
it would have been impossible.
It would have torn your family apart. It would have torn you apart.
Oh, yes.
And it's just, it's kind of crazy how, and I call it the universe. Like, I'm not big into church. I was like you, I was not raised in church. I didn't have all of that stuff. And for me, I know there is a greater spirit out there. Just for one, just thinking about my body and how it heals itself and how it knows what to do, how, generates these things. Like, as humans, we're not smart enough to create something that sophisticated. I will throw that out there. But so I know that there's a greater thing. And like they say that, like, underground, all the trees, all the plants, here I go back to my plants and stuff, everything is connected underground. And I do take some of the stuff from the Bible. Like, I believe that there are some great things, because what is above is below. So if we transition that, everything above is connected as well. So spiritually, we are all connected. We are just not all of us tapped in at the same time or at the same intensity and level. That's my personal philosophy. And so I love it when people talk to me about spirituality and all of those things, because that lights me up. When we can tap into the spirituality and know that we can be healed, know that we can get the next steps, like a spiritual download. We can communicate with anyone in our world, anyone that's not in our world. Like, we have these capacities, but we are not utilizing them.
Mm,
We're not
absolutely.
taking them to the next level. We're not diving in. And for one of the things that really frustrates me is because churches say that it's satanic.
Mm,
It's not satanic to know that deep within you, you are taken care of. Deep within you, you have all the answers that you need as long as you connect. And I think a lot of it is the same, like it's the same, like in the Christian world or the churchy, I call it the churchy world, as the spiritual world. It's a lot of it is the same. It's just there's different words for each one, but it's the same outcome that they're trying to get.
mm-hmm.
So
The same objective is at
yeah,
the origin point of both. The differences that might arise in either, and they exist in both, is judgment, I believe.
yes,
The judgment of, and that was something that was always prevalent in my mind's eye field of vision, Faith, since I was a child, because I wasn't raised with these constructs and
right.
the confines of like
Yep.
the religious dogma. I couldn't understand being a child, a girl of the deep South in Texas, where, I'd been to all sorts of churches with friends, ranging from Episcopalian to Southern Baptist to the Pentecost tongues of fire and
Wow.
everything in between, right? But it's like, I couldn't for the life of me understand how these people could truly believe that their way was the only way. Like,
Do not
how?
get me started on this path.
How? And I would have this conversation with these ministers and these pastors that would probably think I was just this heathen child that,
Oh,
they needed to save this one, but it's
yes.
just, it was I couldn't understand it, because I always had a fascination with traveling the world and different cultures. I got my anthropology degree at Texas State University because I'm interested in other cultures and other
Right.
religions for the sake of understanding kind of that holistic, collective, macroscopic view. Where are the dots to connect between these is what has always lit me up. And
Yes.
so it's like there's these other cultures on the other side of the world that have existed, their belief system have existed for many thousands of years prior to this one that you're trying to peddle me right now. How in the world can you truly believe that your way is the only way? And why are you not asking this question too? Why am I the only one that cares in this whole congregation? You're right here. And that was always like mind-boggling to me from childhood. I couldn't comprehend, I couldn't fathom the reason why.
It's because if you question, then you don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
If you question anything that they're trying to tell you, I literally have the same thoughts and feelings. And I'm like, and I've asked pastors this before. I'm like, okay, if Christianity is the best Christianity in the world, I'm not saying that it is, I'm just saying that this is what I'm hearing. Then why in the world in Christianity do you have Pentecostal? Do you have Baptist? Do you have Catholic? Do you have Lutheran? I said, are they not all based upon the Bible? And if they are all based upon the Bible, how can one take what they want and exclude something else and then tell this other division over here that they're doing it wrong?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe everyone's doing it wrong. Like, and I mean, I've talked about that before, like a lot, because I'm like, that frustrates me. How can you tell me that in the Bible, God is love, Jesus is love, but yet your love does not equal exclusion? That is the highest form of exclusion. It's excluding people because they don't believe the same thing that you believe, when in actuality, our belief systems, when we put them together, can create a higher consciousness and we can actually explode more. But instead, we are segregating and putting people in boxes and telling them, don't open the lid, don't come out of it, don't check, Yeah, there might be other boxes all around, but don't look.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way of putting it. Those boxes, I believe, are the constructs of humankind. And when humankind is incarnated here in this world, there is a degree of perceived illusory separation from that oneness from whence we all came and from whence we will all be going.
Go? Yes.
You know?
Absolutely.
It's like grief and loss and death and birth. These are
Transcend
the things
everything.
that, yes, they connect all of us always. And it is these aspects of what it means to be human will touch every single human in the world throughout history and
Yes.
into future timeline trajectories. This is why this specific inquiry is of the utmost importance for me and what is important to me in my work. Like it connects to everything, and it always will.
I agree with that. I love that. It's very, so you don't get to have these conversations with just anyone because people shut you down. They're like, nope, that's out of my belief system. Nope, my religion does not talk about that. Nope, I don't want to talk about grief because I'm young. I'm not there yet. I don't want to. Yeah. I've got a long time left to go.
Yeah.
And to me, it was the reason I wanted to talk about grief was because, like, I lost a 19-year-old daughter. I lost a 4-year-old granddaughter. Like, old age is a privilege. It is not a right.
It is.
So I want to talk about it. Like, I'm even in the works of creating a like a get together, a meeting, a conference, if you will, of something like that, called Plan Your Own Funeral. Like, I believe that if we can take the stress and the anxiety off of our loved ones after we pass, at least a little bit, then that's all worth it. Because
that just lights my heart up just thinking about that, thinking about what you just said, because most of my family that is still living, they're of the boomer generation.
Okay.
And so they're getting up there in age. And some of them have been a lot more graceful about what it is, what you just described, where they're setting up their affairs prior to, some of them because they have seen what that does to a family, what that does to the ones still living, that not only have to integrate the magnitude of what it means to lose you in this material realm, right? What that feels like, but they also have to navigate their interpersonal relationships with each other with respect to the void that is now in the wake of your passing.
Yes. And I'm talking like the basics, the basest of basic, I don't know. Anyway, the thing, like, so when you pass, and you know this because you help, I'm assuming you helped plan your brother's funeral.
I did.
When you go into that and you go to that funeral home, and you're in there talking with them about what does this family member want? Because this isn't about you at that time. It's about what does this family member want? Did they want to be buried or did they want to be cremated? Basic questions. And you're stuck going, I have no idea. I don't know what their wishes were. And now if you tap into, like, we were just talking about religion, we were talking about Christianity, we were talking about all these things. If you do something that goes against what their religion was, like, that's massive in them. Like, you're not honoring that person, you're honoring yourself at that point. And so I want to take it to that point, like, talk to people. Like, for myself, I want to be cremated. I don't want to take up more space here. My body was just a vessel to host my spirit. That's it. My spirit is now moved on. It is now, I want my body to nourish my plants. You know what I'm saying? I'm going back to my plants. But I think
Quick
that
question, Faith. Have you heard about the pods of that you can purchase to put your remains in and bury at the root of the trees?
I have not, but I've heard of other things similar, like you can go into the ocean and be buried in the ocean out there. I am of the simplistic mindset. I am not going to pay to have my ashes buried at the base of a tree. I will put it in my directions
No,
to
this isn't
whole.
ashes. These are
Oh, your
whole
body.
human bodies. It's
No.
strange. And I believe it's happening in Oregon, where a lot of things are allowed to happen and not in the rest of the world. But
I think that would be a great idea to have your whole body,
they're
as long as it's
building
not embalmed.
gardens with the remains, and like family plots are becoming family garden plots,
Yeah.
where there's like trees in this plot, and this is so and so's tree and this is this person's tree, and like there are different kinds of trees, and your family can come and nurture
I
the
really like that.
space. That's, I mean, I like it too. I'm with you though. Like there is this pressure that mounts at the death of a family member, especially one that's not prepared for. And a lot of it does have to do with like this sudden need for money to take care of and honor that person in the way that they are deserving of. There's a lot of guilt around that, and a lot of people are taken advantage of during these
That was the other
times.
thing. Yes.
And it's not right. Like it's I remember whenever I received the phone call, I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was pregnant, 7 weeks pregnant, and very, very sick with my son. And I mean, I had morning sickness the entire 9 months with him. And I was also grieving the entire 9 months because I found out my brother died when I was 7 weeks pregnant.
Oh.
But and then I had my little girl who was 3 at home with me, I had just had my last nervous breakdown a few months before, and we were at home, and then I got the phone call, right? And in the 3 hours that it took me and my husband and our daughter to reach Houston from San Marcos, where we live, during that time, my mother, in her distraught state, had dealt with, the coroner removing the body from his where he had died in his room. She had been the one to find him initially.
Whole nother trauma set.
Oh my goodness. Like we could go into a whole podcast on that one.
Yes.
But and then on top of that, because of the sensitive time nature that many things like your tissues
organs,
and your organs, there is a protocol that takes place with certain kinds of deaths that you might know about.
Yes.
Because your stepdaughter passed from,
that's
one of the most
common. Able to do any of those things with her because of the head trauma that she had sustained with the accident. But with my father, we did.
Okay.
My father, we did. But yes, you're making snap decisions immediately.
I mean, for her to have to process all of that and I couldn't get there fast enough to get the massive majority of it as it pummeled down on top of her. A lot of what I took care of is the things that came later, like the funeral and the viewing procession and the memorial and vigils and all of this stuff, right? That has to happen. And I recall, though, speaking with the funeral director about when he was upset because I guess he had to work, on my brother, who was a 20-year-old, for all intents and purposes, in excellent shape.
Yeah.
I imagine he normally worked on older people rather than younger people.
Yeah.
And he was in kind of a head funk when I was on the phone with him, but he was like, you didn't tell me that you had approved him for tissue donation. And now where, you know, he was like heaping all of this on my shoulders, like it was my
Right.
fault, and it was what my mother had approved during this time that I had to like sort back through and figure out what had been done. And I mean, just the tumultuous torrential nature of the aftermath that
Yeah.
follows, when it's almost like whenever you like reemerge into a stillness after all of that, when everyone has gone home and there's no more of that stuff to be done, it's like the sky is never the same color again.
No. And then you start to question everything that you said and all of the decisions that you made. You're like,
Play
should
them
I have
over
done
and
this?
over like a tape recorder, right?
Yes. It's like, oh gosh, would they have wanted this? Would they have wanted that? What about this? Oh my gosh, what? Oh my, did I do this right? Are they going to be okay with this? And this is where, like what I was talking about earlier, this is where I want to get into. Like, if we can alleviate just some of those moments, some of that anxiety, some of that stress, why not?
Mm. What did it for you? What was it that alleviated it for you? I know what worked for me.
The stress after the fact.
Yes.
I think for me, like with my daughter, when we lost her, we met with his ex-wife, my husband's ex-wife, and her husband. And I had always been the type, like, I'm going to get along with this woman no matter what, because I have a vested interest in these children. I'm not going to put my blood, sweat, and tears into something that I'm not going to be able to be invited to, or make these children have a second bridal shower or a second baby shower or a second or any of those things because me and the mom can't get along. That was always a big
Word.
thing for me. And so when she passed, when we found out, we immediately went over to her house, and her and my husband started planning. Well, we all started planning. Because now between us, we had 9 children, like between the two families. And so my husband and I had 5 of those. And then there was one son that was her biological full brother. And so he was on the other side, and then they had some other children over there. But we started planning the process then at that moment, but we had no idea. We were talking about it. We had no idea. Did she want to be buried or cremated? No idea. The only reason we knew that she wanted to be cremated was because she was 19. So she's just starting out in life, and she had moved south of the cities where we live here by about an hour and a half or so. And she had a roommate, and they had just talked about this exact thing. And so she came in and said that that's what she had wanted, was to be cremated.
No coincidences.
So that's what we taught. That's what we did, was we cremated her. And then we split the ashes, and half went to my husband and half went to the ex-wife. And then, so we do whatever, we wanted to with them,
That's
give the kids
amazing.
some and do whatever they want to do with it. That's totally fine. And so when we walked into that funeral home, we knew that one. And we figured that, or we weren't sure if we'd be able to have an open casket or not. We had no idea. We walked in blind, pretty much, as you do most of the time when you go to the funeral home. And so when we went in there, so it was my husband and I, her biological mom and her husband, and then the mom's parents, and then my husband's parents. So there was a lot of people in there planning this funeral. And it literally came down to what we decided, not the grandparents. They got to hear it and they got to have a say, but they didn't get the ultimate say. And so it was literally between us 4, the 4 parents of her. And we were just like, okay, money was never an issue. We never let it be an issue. And of course, we couldn't have an open casket with her. She was cremated and all that stuff. So we didn't have like the extra expenses of buying a casket or any of those things. But at that point, caskets are not cheap. They're thousands of dollars. And so then you go through and you tour a casket and like all of these things that you can potentially, like, of course, they might, if you want a casket, like you're not really going to go to a funeral home and say, I want the blue one with the cherry striping. That's not really what you're going to do. But I mean, if you want to cast it, you can tell them, like, my favorite would be like a hand carved oak one or something like that, because they have oak ones there too, whatever. But we had to come up with a eulogy. We had to come up with, did we want it in the newspapers? What was that going to say? We had to come up with the date for the funeral, the viewing for the funeral, all these things that we had to come up with on the spur of the moment, when we never ever thought that we would bury a child. And I'm sure your mother was thinking the same thing. This is not supposed to happen.
Oh, that was all she would say.
Yes.
For like days, and she wouldn't eat anything or drink anything, was this isn't real. This is not supposed to happen. Yeah.
Yes. And I fell into what I call the nothingness. Nothing mattered. Food, water, light, nothing. Literally sit there and stare off into space and do nothing. And it was the craziest. But the one thing that brought me out of that was my husband talking to me about NDEs, near-death experiences. Because with how I was raised, we didn't believe in psychologists and all of those things. And I wasn't going to see a therapist. Like, that just was not in my realm of
right.
And especially if they've not gone through what I've gone through. I really cannot do it. Like, they can theorize and do the book thing all they want, but instead I'm going to save my money and stay home. That's my thoughts and my beliefs only. But so my husband, was like, babe, you need to do something. Like, you can't just sit here all day long staring at the backyard. He goes, listen to this. So he got me onto one. And then I started listening to more and more and more. And that's what really fired me up over the spirituality of everything, was their stories that somehow, some way, they could hear, see, feel things around them that they shouldn't be. People are in other rooms and they're visiting them and hearing them, listening to what they're saying, and their gut-wrenching feels like, why is this happening? And the tears and the sorrow and all these things, or the doctors in another room talking about what's going to happen if this doesn't work, whatever. And so for me, I'm like, oh, everything is connected. Like, we have this thin veil, and our whole lives we're walking this tightrope of maybe one day we'll be here, but today by chance we're still here, all those things. It just takes a second. And
those
boom,
near-death experiences, and as well as the information I uncovered from a book called Hello from Heaven by Paul Guggenheim. Have you heard of his work? He, for me, these kinds of explorations, these insights that are uncovered, what they do for me is they provide me with that empirical evidence that I crave in order to know that this isn't horseshit. It's also more than that, though. It's like, it's not just not horseshit, but it's like, it's something fantastic that we have no real earthly clue until we get there. But there are more and more people coming forward and being validated for these experiences that there's no possible way they could have corroborated with all of these other hundreds of thousands of people that are also stepping forward from different walks of life, from different cultures, from different spiritual backgrounds entirely. And they're sharing the same experiences and the same kinds of information that can't be ignored any longer. And there are researchers that are compiling this information and in very intentional ways, that it's like just to present the data for us all to benefit from, and for us all to gain those insights while we are here in this body, seemingly awake, but really we're asleep to what actually is awaiting us. You know what I'm saying?
Asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
No, I 150 million% agree. I agree so much. Like, and I tell people all the time. So like, you asked me a question earlier, like, how do I tell people, like, when you talk about death and moving forward and all those things, what do I tell them? First of all, I tell everyone, go listen to NDEs on YouTube. Like if I don't care if you're religious, spiritual, anything, go listen to NDEs, because that is a whole other level of understanding, like the potential that, yes, they're not here, and I'm mourning the fact that they're not here. I'm mourning the fact that I didn't get to love her, didn't get to see her get married, didn't get to see her have children, didn't get to help her pick out her wedding dress. I didn't get to do any of those things with her. I also know she's not in pain. She's also has a beautiful life over there, and she's sending messages to us daily. As long as we're willing to open up and listen and feel it and see it, it can be there. Like it's not ended.
Right.
Just a new beginning.
I love your advice to go and listen to NDEs. Let's think about what an NDE is. It's for those of your listeners who don't know, I'm sure they do, but near death experience means you almost died, but you didn't quite get there, right? And you came back to report on what you saw. So then there's the other alternative of, it's not near death. They actually died, like your stepdaughter, like my brother, like my grandparents, like my stepmom, like my kid's godmother, all of these people that have passed. It wasn't near death. They actually did die, but that word is so loaded. Like they're not dead. There is something like, because we can tap into that evidence about the NDEs of people that actually come back as humans and report what they find. And I mean, for me, what I tell people who are going through the thick of it, is to talk to their loved one. Yeah. Talk to them like they're here, and then see what happens. Right. Talk to them and then report, like keep a journal and report what happens, because dates and days, they blend together whenever we are in that state of what you described, where you're just kind of you're here but you're not here. You're tapped into other realms and other dimensions, because that's where they are. And you are you're very in tune with those realms, and so it makes you appear like you're really, like your feet aren't on the ground here on earth. Yeah. Oh, yes. But if you talk to your loved ones as though they are there, because they are there, their body just isn't anymore. Right. You will be absolutely fascinated by what opens up, and the messages that trickle through, and all of the synchronicities that start lining up, and how they have this new perspective, kind of like what the people report who go through the NDEs report, where they're like everywhere at once. They're not like in this central focused point of energy. They are all of everywhere, and they can see all of everything. It's like they have this new perspective from the macroscopic point of view of your life, and how much they love you is so much more felt. At least it was by me in these respects, like in ways that my brother and we could never really relate in this way that I'd hoped that we would get to. I kind of mused that he passed away right at the time when we both became adults, because he was 10 years younger than I was. Okay. And he was 20 years old. And it was like we were finally both adults, and it wasn't me a teenager and him a toddler, or, some strange split. And then it's like, and then he left, like right whenever we got to this even playing field. And that was my frustrated, bitter state. I was very angry at him for several years, but and that bitterness and that anger was what inspired me to start talking to him and start telling him how I felt about everything that happened and choices that he made. And I started getting some messages back, and I started connecting with him in this way that I don't believe would have ever been possible while he was alive. Right. Because there's too much. So I don't want to say that there's too much on earth. I don't want to say that at all. And I know I was starting to say that, but I'm going to
take it all back. I just want to say that there's so much ways to confuse messages here on earth. When I believe that they pass or you're speaking to a loved one, there's not really any way to confuse the message. I mean, there is on your part because we're here and we have a billion ways to confuse a message, but on their part, they don't. They're sending it and they keep sending it and sending it. Then they try a new way, I think, and send it again and send it again and a new way. Oh, you didn't get that one. Let me send this one over here.
Let me use this family friend to,
right. Let me put this roadblock in front of you.
They'll pass the message along because you're not getting it right now. That's so
right.
funny. Yeah.
And so, I like the term of threes. So if you see things 3 times, then that's not well, I don't believe in coincidences anyway. So if you see something the first time, it's happening. But if you don't notice it the first time, maybe you don't notice, maybe kind of like see it the second time, you're like, yeah, no, that's not really real. The third time is like, yes, hello, knock, 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 anyone there? I'm sending you something. So, or I'm trying to stop you from making a bad mistake, or maybe, whatever, trying to help guide you through this realm. Because I believe we're in a realm and we're navigating through it. And I have a lot of beliefs on this. So
I love hearing about them. I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing your perspectives while being given the platform to share my own. It's been
absolutely,
yeah, it's very cathartic. It's not I do talk about it with those who are ready to talk about it. But it's not everyone, like you said. And it's not often, because it still is very stigmatized. I think it's stigmatized because it is something that we innately know will eventually be something we're face to face with, whether it's the loss of someone else or just the loss of our own human body. And that is something to that is a colossal awareness, a force to be reckoned with, and it takes courage to stare it in the face. But it's whenever I was forced to, it's like I said, it has been my greatest gift of awakening to who it is I truly am and what it is we are here to do. And because we're here for a finite time, and it is a gift that we're here to embody and embrace. And I think it's a gift that a lot of us aren't aware of. And so we do take it for granted.
I agree with that. You mentioned earlier that you have a community. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, I have a community on YouTube, and I frequent Facebook occasionally to connect with other human avatars in meaningful ways. And my community on YouTube is called ZenJen CoNexions, and it's where I'm exploring all of these realities and awarenesses that transpired after that origin point of my brother's passing. That was kind of the ground zero for me of where that awakening process occurred. And there's a lot of conversations that I have with amazing other human avatars, and our energies intersecting in amazing ways that they bring illumination for others to benefit from, because something entirely new and different is created when these orbits of influence like yours and my own are brought together in conjunction with one another. And there's a new perspective, almost like a new lens for others to benefit from as they gaze through and they tune into those conversations. And that's what I'm exploring on my YouTube channel, ZenJen CoNexions. And I would love it for everyone to join us over there. It's a collective effort that we are embarking upon.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Sounds absolutely divine, to be honest. And guess where I'm heading after this?
It is. And I'm so excited to have intersected with your orbit of influence, Faith. Your energy is divine. And I've very much enjoyed this interaction. It's been a gift.
Thank you. I was just talking to one of my friends today, before I got on the chat this morning. And I told her that I had a dream. It's real recent, just in like the night, not last night, but the night before.
I love
And
dreams.
me too.
I
They're
get
so
excited when
powerful and
someone tells me.
significant. And so I had this dream where I could just shut my eyes and I can suck up all the energy around me, everything, bring it into my core. And then when my eyes open, I can push it out to everyone around me 100-fold and help heal them all the way around me, because that is what I want to give out to the world. And I think that that is why I work with my plants, so that I can suck up that energy and then I can push it out, because that's all that I ever want to do. And so, and she's like, I feel it.
I feel it. That was powerful. That was powerful as all get out. Seriously, I got soul tingles all over just hearing you talk about doing
Oh,
that. And that's yeah, like the power of visualization it's a strong one for me. And I know that it's a powerful catalyst when someone like yourself comes along and is able to prompt those visions into this what I call my mind's eye field of vision.
yes.
And there's so much potential. It's like teeming with potential. It's ripe for manifestation to take root in my world whenever some powerful visualization like that comes into play for me.
Yeah, it just and I don't want, and I've realized that even going beyond this podcast, I've realized that the knowledge that I have within me, I have been literally hiding and staying here and not putting it out there. And that goes against the very being of me wanting to help those 10 people that I mentioned earlier. And so this is my push to get this knowledge out there, my push to help people, even if it's to take the next step, my push to get people, like even on your level, to take that next step and to do more, be more, see more, all of those things, to help more. That is my goal, is to be that catalyst, that cheerleader, if you will, to go.
We all have, yeah, yes, we all have those next steps to take, and those cheerleaders
Everyone.
along the way for us, they might not be who we expect.
No, they
And
never are. I have learned never.
I love how you mentioned that. I'm gonna share one quick little story. I know we're probably over time by now, but my a business mentor of mine, she's a very high performing woman. She was the CEO, or not, no, she was the COO of a high ticket coaching agency, seven what do they call it, 7-figure business a year, that kind of this is where she came from. And so I hired her whenever she went off on her own soulpreneur way, away from being a part of a team, whenever her father passed away suddenly, and she could no longer, as you and I both mentioned, like, your world is never the same after that. And so she couldn't really embody that role any longer for that agency. And so she went off on her own, and where she's doing perfectly well now, she's doing great. But during this time, our paths intersected in this just very uncanny way, that it was like, wow, I was put here to help her, but it was really me that ended up hiring her to help me with my business. But what actually ended up happening, it's like this line between client and provider becomes very blurred whenever these sequences of human avatar energy field intersection, like it occurs in divine timing, because it was meant to. And in the ways that she has mentored me so well with my own business, and has helped me reach, my potential in ways that I envision for myself, I was able to help her to navigate through this tumultuous landscape of not only building her own business, but doing that in the wake of her father passing away in a hospital during the shutdown of 2020.
Right.
And her not being able to be with him during that time, and it being like this, and she's like me, she's a very like focused on empirical data, doesn't really want a lot of fluff. I mean, I like a little more fluff than this woman does, I'll just say that. But she, it was really important though for her to have a protocol and a way of working through this landscape that was, it was overwhelming. And in to learn that she could still connect with her father, that was what really opened up for her. Do you know the Rumi quote, "The wound is where the light enters you," Faith?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that one has changed. I mean, it's changed my world, and it's changed the clients whom I've worked with in this capacity, their world, and in knowing that that wound that's created in our heart space, it's actually that opportunity for us to open ourselves up to bare our heart to the world in a way that's going to help others transform
I
while
love that
they're
you're mentioning
witnessing
that.
our
Yes, because
transformation.
in the business world, they talk about, and I know I might get a little ish back on this, but I don't care.
Ish back.
In the business world, a lot of people talk about share the scar, not the wound.
Ooh.
But I have a different mindset. Not that I want to go online and be crying and sobbing and victimy all the time, because that's not what I'm talking about. But that wound, the scar is what you get to after you've healed.
Yes.
The wound is what happens when you're in the midst of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And when you're in that wound, you have to figure out ways to help yourself to heal that wound.
Exactly.
Whether that is deep breath meditations, whether that is listening to 5,000 NDEs, whether that is doing the cold therapy, whatever that healing modality is for you, that's what healing that wound is. So when I hear people talk about the scar, I'm like, you've already lost your people. They don't want to hear about the scar. They want to hear about what you did.
Where they're at right now.
Right. And they're not here at the end. They want to see you vulnerable. They want to hear, like, today was a really crappy day because today is the 6th anniversary of my daughter's passing. And today is that. And it's so hard. Like, I myself have a hard time doing it. But I know that that's what needs to be done, because we have this idea, this perception of perfection that we have to be all put together. We have to look amazing online. We have to have, everything is staged. Everything is, in my mind, when it's done like that, everything is faked. Like, you can fake it. This is why, like I was telling Jen before, this is why this podcast does not get edited. Everything that's in this podcast is in this podcast. Whether there's a flub up me at the beginning of this podcast, when I totally flubbed the podcast, it's going to be in here because I like transparency. But
I love
back to the scar, like, I would rather see your wound to know that you're human, to know that you're searching for healing modalities for that scar. And then as you transition into the scar, you're working on the wound, and then you transition into the scar. That's
I want to add to that, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simply because you have a scar to show doesn't mean that the wound still doesn't fester beneath it.
Yes. That is a good one too.
Yeah, because that can happen, and I've seen that happen, where people think that they've been through it, and like they know the drill, they know the ropes, and they know what they need to do, but there's something still there that I can feel when I mean, I've done a lot of, I've done a lot of work on my own extrasensory perceptions in my connecting with other people and their energy fields. And there are times when I can, man, I can feel that wound festering beneath that scar that they are showing this world like a badge, you know, and they're flashing it around like a flag, you know, and it's okay. And that's a good thing that you've made it to the point to where you can share in that way, but there's still something there that we need to dive deep into, Lovey.
Cool.
Like, can we
That's a good
please,
one.
you
Yes,
know?
because like I have this here, right? I just got this. This is a burn. And of course, it hurt like when I got it, right? I touched a pan, it was hot, blah, blah, blah. But when this burn turns into the scar, you know, and it heals and all that stuff, every time I see this, I remember exactly what happened. If that scar was a traumatic one, like say, I don't know, you're riding your bicycle and you fall down, you break your arm and your bone's sticking out, you know, like a big traumatic scar. You're gonna
Yes.
have stitches, you're gonna have all this. It's gonna take a while to heal that scar, right? You're gonna have to go through therapy, you're gonna have to get set a replacement, you're gonna have to go through stitches, you're gonna have to remove all that stuff. Like there's lots of steps that go into it. After that scar heals, okay, and there's no more doctor's appointments, no more nothing. Like you're like free to go, whatever, go do whatever you want. You're still going to have limitations on that. Your arm might not bend as much as it used to. It might have a creak in it. You know what? The weather gets unruly and you can feel it in the joint now. Like these are all the things that happen. Like with grief, it still comes back up. Like because
And with
nothing
every
ever
death,
truly
it
really
all,
healed.
have you seen also with every subsequent death that occurs, you need to then go back and navigate through your
The first
daughter's
one?
death.
Yes.
Yes. That
Yes.
it's like this accumulation process, but it's also like cumulative in
Right.
terms of you need to rehash everything again because it feels like each subsequent one brings a new color to your lens.
Yes. And it helps you heal in a different way.
Yes.
Because the first one, obviously, when you're initially going through it, all you can see is that immediate mess of, okay, this is a stat one. I need to go ahead and get to the ER. This needs stitches. That's a stat one. I need to get the paddle stat, right? The stat one. But after the fact, it's like, okay, well, that's all done. Now what do I need to do? Okay, I need to do some mindful meditation, whatever. My heart rate's a little high. I need to learn to bring it down a little bit, you know. That's a different type. You don't see that at the beginning because you have the stat one. Then you have to go through the next one. Well, then it's like, okay, well, then we need to go here. All right, well, now my heart's beating a little slow. What do I do to pick that up? Okay, we got to go through this method, you know, whatever. But yeah, I think that, so like, even like with reading books, you read it the first time, you get the initial impact, it's in your face. Then you read a second time, you get something that you didn't pick up before, and then a third time, and then a fourth time. And like, you get all these different inputs. I firmly believe the grief ones give you the same if you're willing to look.
Mm-hmm.
If you're
Yes.
willing to feel, if you're willing to go down that path and are confident and comfortable at the level that you have attained at this moment. But only then.
Absolutely.
If you are not confident and sure, you cannot go down it without breaking.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why it's so transformative. Tell me if you'd agree with this, Faith. It's so transformative for so many people to go through the grieving process because it forces you to break.
Absolutely.
There is no
Absolutely.
way that I
I was just
couldn't
gonna say,
break into a million little pieces when this person whom I love so.
oh no, you froze. Jen, are you there? Well, Jen's internet was unstable and I lost her, but go ahead and stay tuned to the channel and we'll have a part 2 and bring her back on to finish because she was in the middle of saying something that was absolutely amazing. And, or at least I think it was, I'm not really 100% sure, but I really want to know what she said because everything that she said up to this point was amazing. Anyway, all of her links that she mentioned in here that she mentioned in the podcast today will be posted below. So go ahead and check those out. Check out her YouTube channel, ZenJen, I think it's Communications, something like that. The link will be below. But thank you again for tuning in to Release the Grief podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.